Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Mark Martin.
And I'm Charlene Aaron. New developments in the Ebola outbreak crisis. Another American in Liberia tested positive and is heading home for treatment. Meanwhile, public health officials are trying to contain the spread of Ebola in Dallas, where an African man with the disease has been hospitalized. An American cameraman covering the Ebola outbreak in Liberia for NBC News is the latest U.S. citizen stricken with the deadly virus. Ashoka Mukpu will be flown home to the U.S. for treatment. As the outbreak continues to rage, the government response, both in Africa and the U.S., has been slow and questionable. The disease has already killed more than 3,000 people in Africa. And according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there could be as many as 1.4 million cases of Ebola by January. Save the Children reports that Ebola is spreading at the rate of 5 new cases an hour in Sierra Leone. The chief of the United Nations Ebola mission admits that the international community has been a bit late to respond to the epidemic. There are also worries Ebola could become airborne and spread in the U.S. and around the world through travel and other means. Health officials are investigating how many people Thomas Eric Duncan might have infected. Duncan is the first ever confirmed case of Ebola on American soil. A Dallas emergency room nurse sent Duncan home despite showing symptoms and admitting he had traveled from West Africa. Duncan's nephew called the CDC after he was turned away from the hospital.
I was terrified, scared, worried.
The CDC has issued a nationwide alert to all hospitals in the U.S. on how to appropriately respond to possible cases of the deadly virus. But experts are confident that U.S. medical procedures will keep Ebola from running wild here.
The only fatal part of it may be the guy whose treatment was delayed, but it's not likely to result in anything else that is, that's catastrophic or fatal.
Meanwhile, Duncan's family is quarantined under armed guard in their Dallas apartment.
They cannot come out. They are not even allowed to come on the porch.
Meanwhile, CBN's Operation Blessing remains on the ground in Liberia, providing supplies and working with area churches to teach people about prevention and treatment.
Another virus is cropping up in states across the country. So far, 4 children with enterovirus D68 have died. The CDC is investigating whether their deaths were caused by the virus or something else. CBN health reporter Lori Johnson tells us what you can do to protect your children.
Enterovirus D68 usually begins with a cough, then can get much worse. Parents should immediately go to the doctor or hospital if a child has difficulty breathing or moving their arms or legs. Doctors across the country report seeing a new enterovirus symptom, paralysis.
We don't understand why sometimes in some children enteroviruses attack the nervous system.
The paralysis usually goes away when the child recovers from the infection.
There is no specific treatment or vaccine for enteroviral infections such as this one.
Doctors say the best prevention for enterovirus, the flu, and other illnesses is to keep your hands clean. Try to wash them thoroughly 5 or 6 times a day. Also, don't share drinking glasses or utensils. Try not to touch your face. Cover your coughs and sneezes, and strongly consider staying home so you don't make anyone else sick.
If you're exposed to a bug, doctors say you have a better chance of fighting it off if you have a strong immune system. All next week on the 700 Club, we'll be showing you ways to strengthen your immune system. The information will also be downloadable and on this DVD free of charge. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
13 abortion clinics in Texas are closed today after a federal appeals court upheld the state's new abortion law. The law requires abortion clinics to meet the same standards as other hospital-style surgical centers. Abortion providers said the standards were unnecessary and cost too much. The state argued they were necessary for improved patient safety. There are 7 abortion clinics left in the state.
So far, the Supreme Court has made no moves to take up the issue of same-sex marriage. Several states have asked the High Court to consider cases where federal appeals courts have struck down voter-approved laws defining marriage as between one man and one woman. Those laws have been ruled unconstitutional in 12 states. The High Court did take up a religious discrimination appeal case requested by the Obama administration. The justices will consider whether a retailer's refusal to hire a woman wearing a Muslim headscarf was religious discrimination.
The second annual ExGay Awareness Month is taking place with events in Washington, D.C. The group Voice of the Voiceless organized the conference. This year's featured speaker is Ambassador Alan Keyes.
The group says tens of thousands of people have left the gay lifestyle, but they're intimidated into silence. Ephraim Graham has that story.
In the volatile debate over sexual orientation, the voices of ex-gays are rarely heard. Voice of the Voiceless wants to change that.
I have been free of the obsession, the compulsion of same-sex attraction for over 40 years.
After years of effective therapy, I realized that being gay was not really a true expression of who I really am, and changed to ex-gay.
They also told of rejection and hate.
I have suffered more discrimination and intolerance as an ex-gay than I did when I actually was in the lifestyle. Many ex-gays are afraid to come out of the closet because of the harassment that we receive.
Founder Christopher Doyle told CBN NewsWatch it's time the world listen to ex-gays.
We're just simply saying that we want a seat at the table. We want our voices to be heard.
Doyle is asking for legal protection from discrimination due to sexual orientation and says states should stop efforts to ban therapy for those seeking to change.
They're literally trying to take away the choice that come out of homosexuality and pursue heterosexuality. And so we're simply saying that we deserve to be protected and our rights not infringed upon by these activists who only want one viewpoint to be heard on this issue.
And this weekend is the second annual Voice for the Voiceless conference.
Looking overseas now, Hong Kong's leader has agreed to meet with pro-democracy advocates after a week of public protests. Tens of thousands of demonstrators have been blocking city streets, calling for more input in selecting the territory's leader and less interference from China. China is watching the situation closely and might intervene if the protests get out of control. Anger at Beijing is one reason why Hong Kong's Christian community is strongly supporting the protests. Churches are holding public prayer vigils and are handing out water and food to protesters and police alike. CBN News senior international correspondent George Thomas says churches of all denominations are making their voices heard.
They see this as a moment to send a very clear message to China, specifically from the point of view of religious freedom. They see they've experienced for many, many years incredible religious freedom on the territory, and they want to maintain that. They don't want to see Chinese interference, not just from a political standpoint, Ephraim, but also from a religious standpoint. And so they are making their voice very, very clear.
Stay tuned to CBNNews.com for more updates on this story.
Pope Francis has gotten together his ambassadors from across the Middle East to find ways to better protect Christians targeted by Islamic militants. The Pope hopes the three-day conference will come up with ways to show how the Church stands with persecuted Christians. The Vatican is also pushing for military force to stop the militants' advance. ISIS has seized a large part of Iraq and targeted religious minorities, killing hundreds and forcing hundreds of thousands to leave their homes.
At times, Israel and the United Nations find themselves at odds. Now, as Israel faces accusations of war crimes for its fight against Hamas terrorists, it is offering an olive branch of sorts. As Chris Mitchell reports, this could help reconcile an often stormy relationship.
Israel is often singled out at the United Nations for condemnation. Now, the Jewish state wants the world body to do something positive. Recognize Yom Kippur as an official UN holiday.
We thought that this was the right moment to recognize also the most important day in the Jewish calendar as being a day which belongs to the whole of humanity and not only to the Jewish people.
There are 10 official holidays at the United Nations, including Christmas, Good Friday, and there's also 2 Muslim holidays. And there are also so-called world days, including Buddhist holidays and the Persian New Year. But so far, no recognition of the Jewish holy days. The book of Leviticus says, "The day of atonement shall be a holy convocation for you. You shall afflict your souls, and you shall do no work on that same day, for it is the day of atonement to make atonement for you before the Lord your God."
It's the Day of Atonement because Judaism, at the end of the day, is also at the origin of Christianity and Islam.
Foreign Ministry spokesman Emmanuel Nachshon describes it as the Jewish people's legacy to humanity.
It gives Judaism also its right place among the other important religions.
About 60 countries, including the U.S. and the Christian group called the European Coalition for Israel, support Israel's request.
The Jewish people should be recognized for their holidays. Yom Kippur in particular should be it has a message which goes beyond Judaism.
The request faces a lot of bureaucratic hurdles. It's unlikely the UN would create an 11th day off, mainly due to financial reasons. Yom Kippur could replace a U.S. holiday like Labor Day, or alternate with one of them. So far, the main objection comes from Arab states. Nachshon says recognizing Yom Kippur could help to ease relations with the UN.
We are under the impression that Israel is being singled out in a variety of issues and mostly in a political context. And by giving an official recognition to the most important Jewish holiday, it will be also a step of reconciliation, and it will make our belonging to the UN and our cooperation with the UN much easier.
Israel and the Jewish world mark Yom Kippur this Saturday. By next year, they hope the commemoration includes the international community as well. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, standing with Israel, American evangelicals show their support for the Jewish state. 3 out of 4 Israelis do not trust President Obama's Middle East foreign policy. That's according to a Knesset panel's poll taken just before Yom Kippur. Only 25% said they would call the president, quote, a true friend of Israel. The poll also showed Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party would gain 8 Knesset seats if elections were held today. The survey's chief analyst says the results are a clear response to Obama's criticism of Israeli construction in Jerusalem neighborhoods.
Anti-Semitism is on display not just in the Middle East, but in Europe and even here in America. This weekend, American evangelicals are showing their support for Israel. Concerned Women for America is joining with former presidential candidate Mike Huckabee for the Stand with Israel rally. CBN chief political correspondent David Brody recently sat down with CWA's Penny Nance for more on the event.
Stand with Israel. Give me the genesis of this event.
The real genesis started in Israel, actually. I went to Israel in April of 2013, and while I was there, I just had the honor of going to Yad Vashem, which is their Holocaust museum in Jerusalem. And so, you know, you see the chronicling of the murder of 6 million Jews by Adolf Hitler, but you also see something else that's so sad and shameful to me, and that's the fact that Christians from 1933 to 1945, for the most part, were completely disinterested or uninformed or uninvolved with what was happening right in front of their faces. So I walked away from that. That's a long way to say I walked away thinking, if I had been alive, if I had been in Nazi-occupied Europe during the Holocaust, who would I have been? Would I have been one of the people who was willing to risk it all, including the safety of my family? And so that has been a haunting question for me since April of 2013. But what I realized when I got here is I don't have to wait for it to be as horrible as that. There are things I need to be doing right now. And when I saw what was happening around the country and around the world, in France and in Europe, in response to the fact that Israel had to protect herself from Hamas, this new, I believe, wave of anti-Semitism that has erupted around the world, I thought, we can't be silent. This is our time to speak up in defense of Israel, in defense of our Jewish friends and neighbors all over this country.
So explain why Christians are such friends of Israel. I think a lot of people are trying to people that don't understand,
Right.
and they're trying to figure out why would evangelical Christians, conservative Christians, really take such a liking and a love for Israel. Can you kind of take me through that a little bit?
It's very plain in Genesis. And this is what I've said to Jewish people when I'm talking. I'm like, you know what? The fact that I am a truly Bible-believing evangelical is good for you. Because when I believe the Bible, I believe all of it, not just the politically correct or popular parts. That includes Genesis, and that includes the Abrahamic covenant that is, still real and still intact. And I believe that God gave the Jews the land of Israel. And they have not only a historic right and history in occupying the land, living in the land, and a right to the land, but they also have such a moral right to the land. The fact that they have been chased out of and murdered in almost every country in the world. They have to have a place where they can go, and they must be able to protect themselves.
Up next, actress Reese Witherspoon talks about her latest movie, and you'll meet two of these children when we take you behind the scenes with the cast of The Good Lie after this.
Welcome back to CBN News Today. Beginning in the 1980s, a 20-year civil war in Sudan killed more than 1 million people. Thousands of young men escaped by immigrating to America.
They're often called the Lost Boys of Sudan, and a new film based on their story hits theaters today called The Good Lie. And as Ephraim Graham reports, it took producers 11 years to complete.
More than 20,000 children escaped Sudan's deadly second civil war by walking thousands of miles to freedom. At least 4,000 of these lost boys of Sudan eventually made it to the United States. Ger Dewani is one of them.
When the civil war came, and find me there. When we have to go to Ethiopia by foot, that's the place where my journey really began, to Ethiopia in 1987.
7 years later, Dewani began high school in Des Moines, Iowa, earned a basketball scholarship, then became a fashion model and actor. His latest role...
Hey, you're, Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, right. Where are you going?
To my home.
...is a fictional account of the Lost Boys' journey, adjustment to American life, and the unique bumps on the road.
May I ask, what credential is required to drive a car?
Well, you need a driver's license. You practice, and then you pass the test. Whoa, slow down. Left. Okay, now just stop. Whoa, put the brakes. You okay?
Oh, I think you should just stick to walking.
We sat down with Dewani and his castmates before The Good Lie's premiere.
Ger, you actually are from South Sudan. You were a child soldier. You were a refugee. How true to reality is the film?
I have so many titles under my name. Yeah, the story is very close to me. It came right from where I'm from. And in the center of it is our life experiences as the boys who really fled the country in 1987 by foot, all the way to Ethiopia with no food to little. It was just a whole chaos was going on in 1991, where sometimes I wonder if people knew about what was going on in 1991. And then here we are now, we're making movies about 1991 and the same problem is still going on.
More than 2 million have died in Sudan's civil war. It's a statistic and a story that drew Academy Award-winning actress Reese Witherspoon to the project.
You're giving me the check back in 6 months speech?
She plays a counselor, helping 3 lost boys find jobs in Kansas City.
Your character, if you could only describe her in one word, how would you describe her?
Feisty.
Feisty.
So I'm going to try and get you more job interviews. It's not going to be easy.
I have faith, Yardit.
Yardit?
This is a special name for you.
For me?
Yes, it had great cultural significance.
What does it mean?
It means great white cow.
Okay. Well, it's better than a lot of things I've been called.
What is it about this role that made you want to do it?
The script was beautiful. It just really told the story of the Lost Boys of Sudan in a beautiful way, the struggle of these children traveling thousands of miles across the desert just to find safety.
The film begins with a look at that harrowing escape. Sudanese children walking hundreds of miles, crossing bodies of water, braving heat exposure. And boys weren't the only ones to make the journey. Kuth Wheel makes her acting debut in this film.
We may not know the exact day we were born.
As the lost boy's sister, Abitel.
Brings me to you, Kuth. You actually are from Sudan. You were in a refugee camp. You lost your dad in the war in Sudan in 1993, right? I don't even know where to go. I mean, how do you act in this film knowing your personal history? I mean, all that you've endured.
I mean, for me, besides my own personal history, I felt that it brought closure, in a sense, like for everyone that had gone through this. And it's still going through it today. And it was a journey to learn about myself. It's so inspiring to see these children go through this and somehow come out of it laughing, in a sense. And I learned so much about my own history that I didn't necessarily know because I immigrated to the U.S. as a child.
With such close ties to Sudan, the Good Lies cast hopes American audiences will learn and laugh at this story, ripped from the emotional pages of real life.
I let my brother be taken away by soldiers instead of me.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News, Nashville, Tennessee.
To protect me.
Finally today, a man's wife and son vanish along with millions of others.
Yeah, it's the cataclysmic scenario in the new movie Left Behind, starring Nicolas Cage. Actor Alec Ramey, who stars in the film based on the popular Left Behind book series, told CBN News why he chose the part.
And I went in and read for the part, and it blew me away because this guy is of the Islamic faith. He's a good guy. He's obviously has good morals. And he's portrayed as a man that is there to help.
I think what we should all be doing right now is saying a prayer.
A prayer?
Left Behind opens in theaters nationwide today, and for more interviews with the cast, go to our CWN Facebook page.
So many great faith-based movies coming out.
It's wonderful to see a movie about the rapture right out there with Nicolas Cage starring in it.
Well, that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
Yeah, thanks for watching today. Have a great weekend.